to increase knowledge, inshallah. Okay, today we're going to continue discussing an introduction before we actually get into the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This will be the most technical. I'll get just to emphasize the importance of learning C, and today we're going to talk about codification, or we take this as, especially when we talk to our young people. I don't mean to pick on them, right? You ask them about certain information. Why didn't you check YouTube? You talk about back in the day when we were their age. Well, why didn't you just look at YouTube? Why? We didn't have these tools at our disposal. So also knowing some awareness of how the Islamic sciences came about, how they got codified, inshallah ta'ala, is also relevant. So please bear with me. This class, the next few classes won't be as technical. So before so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about first. Became an independent science and found its own literature. And as I mentioned, there are a few reasons, and I want to emphasize. Number one is the sources. When we know this process, when we have some awareness, I'm not saying, but when we have some awareness of how Islamic knowledge was saved and preserved, helps us to understand sources of this information. Nowadays, it's the control of information, the resources to information out there. There's also that concern of people being in control of what type of information we consume, and even type of information we put out there, right? But when it comes to alhamdulillah, we can ensure that the sources of Seerah are found, the whole process that they went through. So another thing is the authenticity and reliability of information. Again, there are principles in the way the Quran was preserved and the way the Sunnah was preserved, hand in hand, and from there developed the Seerah, as we're going to talk about, and there was the whole process, principles, the science of hadith and everything that. Also, it helps us, right, to know, to be sure that we have is authentic and reliable. Point is can also be back to the other point, a concern now with false information, right? We hear all types of bits and pieces of news of it, and we're not sure. Is this reliable? Is it true? What they look for? It might be true, might not be true, right over the place. So when it comes to Islamic information, the sciences, alhamdulillah, right, we can know and be assured that this information is sound. Another point is, and I'm going to mention a bunch of technical things, and one of the main reasons for that is to preserve the heritage of right nowadays. If it's older, we like to say it's old, it's out of touch, right? But when we look at efforts that our scholars put into preserving, we see the discipline, we see the truthfulness, we see the position when it came to gathering this knowledge. And everyone belittle that or put it to the side. Unfortunately, as we hear, sometimes when we discuss our past, I'm not in favor of it. We might use terms like medieval times, pre-modern, right? For some those times were anything but, right? They were best in those times. So we don't want to take our scholars, of our ulama from the past. See the challenges, right? When we look at ages that all the Islamic sciences that they had challenges, right? It wasn't any societal issues, a lot of academic issues, especially during the time of the Tabi'un. You have the different political issues. You have civil strife, the different set, Mu'tazila, the Shia, the civil strife. There were that would bully, for lack of a better word, the Sahaba, right? And people in position would oppress the Sahaba. Continued into the time of the Tabi'un. So the point is, there was a lot of unrest, a lot of civil issues, or a lot of academic challenges. Our scholars, they persevered, and they were able to preserving this knowledge, inshallah ta'ala. So for those reasons, we just kind of had how Seerah became preserved and codified into what we inshallah ta'ala. Just give me 1 second. So real quickly, just to summarize with Seerah, of course we have the Prophet sallallahu. This is a foundation of our. So we have that distinguished chain of transmission the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is just a quick summary, and we'll get into, and then we'll talk about dominance outside of Arabia before Islam. And also in today's khutbah, where there's a long hadith summarizes what was happening for Islam, right, and outside of Arabia. So we have, and the companions participated with the Prophet ﷺ in every aspect of Islam. We have to understand it wasn't just internal faith, but were somehow like the malaika, right? And thing was facilitated for them. No, right? It's opposite, and they sacrificed everything that they could possibly be the Prophet ﷺ and to support Islam. And they passed this down to the Tabi'un, learned and transmitted these things that they learned from the Sahaba. I mentioned this last few Sahaba that survived, right? 100 years. There were still Sahaba, another eyewitness account to the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, still alive in this knowledge, well over 100 years after the Hijrah. May Allah be pleased with them. This last class too, we get the great Khalifa Omar Abdul Aziz from his position, his authority is to aid Islamic knowledge. In spite of everything that Muslim empire, he is concerned with helping and supporting Muslim scholars. This they're able, of course, after Allah, they're able to really begin to focus more on preserving everything. So summary, the beginning, this interest in the scholarship, Muhammad's biography, is right. It's very similar to the hadith process, right? We had to authentically kind of record it. It wasn't like there were these different understandings, on different authorities, positions, and then the fiqh, right? Seerah was pretty direct. We have the events, we check it, and there it was in the first century. Again, the Sahaba, they evolved and they had strong concern in every aspect of life, right? Even to the point where they fought with him, like his battles, right? So again, it wasn't just some face hurt they had, and they really any physical effort. No, right? They sacrificed everything. So this also learning this information, preserving it, and do so. And this is what was successful, right? And remember, Islamically, one of the beautiful things of this transmission. Islamic knowledge was also parts. It was memorized. Book forms came later on. Initially, Islamic knowledge was preserved and memorized into the books simultaneously. So Islamic knowledge was preserved not only in form but also in oral. So the Tabi'un picked this knowledge. This is where the knowledge begins to take a whole lot different. So the Tabi'un ones who initially started to record information concerning the life of Prophet, and they had other books, right? The Tabi'un, a lot of knowledge, right? Here they would include hadith in there. So you have ilmu rijal, and then you have principles of fiqh. So they had all of this kind of mixed up into there, and in some of those books, Seerah. Right? The Seerah was found in most of the within contained all types of knowledge and information. They began to track just the things related to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and the independent books of study. For example, you have Al-Maghazi, battles by Musa, who was a tabi'. And so as they're recording this information, the concentration is there as well. Rahimahullah said concerning Musa ibn Uqba, he said, take from him, for indeed he is trustworthy. There was the process also of making sure that the info is authentic and reliable. And we also have the great tabi' radiallahu anhu Yazdi, who compiled this book also called Al-Maghazi. But these books, they didn't survive. It shows us how difficult it was to preserve books. It was to preserve information, and it was very complicated, and a lot of these were lost. But we know they existed because they're mentioned. We know that they wrote them, and also these books are quoted by the great historian Mahak in his other books. So now, early second century, this is where Omar Hernandez, and he's supporting the knowledge. And this is where we get a lot of the great scholars concerning Seerah. And remember, many of these scholars are also hadith, right? These are trustworthy scholars that are chains of narrations when it comes to Bukhari. People like Asim ibn Omar al-Qatada, ibn Sa'd. You have Az-Zuhri. You have a lot of scholars here. And again, on these names and memorize them. If we could, that's beautiful. But to mention their legacy, mention their efforts, we have to give props to these scholars and what they did to preserve. This was up until about the early second century. So now from the second century to the 5th century, it's pretty much the same way, right? The authentication process is there. Beginning of this with the Maghazi. You also have Urwa ibn Zubair and al-Awam. He is a person to actually start to information specifically about the Prophet's life, al-Maghazi. So number of tabi'un here, and they're doing a lot of work in terms of the Prophet's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there were some other broad books, again, books that contained a lot of information, tafsir, knowledge and information. For example, books by Ibn Sa'id, Ibn Sa'ad, right? These were great scholars, and they included a lot of information. And there was one particular scholar who had a lot of students who were very in Seerah, and that was Muhammad ibn Shihab az-Zuhri. So then the process now is it's getting more specified, more specific. Books that begin to appear that were, for example, based on when we talk about right, Seerah, now it includes all of these things, right? His lineage, his upbringing, his mission, his attributes, all of the beginning up until we understand Seerah. Now that's our understanding of it, and that's how we look at it. Initially, as we see, initially it was mainly concerned with Ghazi, and then that were concerned specifically Vedic models. For example, the Khasa'is, right? All these different books that were just focused on certain aspects of behavior, his character, certain things throughout his day. Right? There weren't general books of that covered all of the Prophet's life. Some of them just mentioned other aspects of how the signs that he was a prophet. So that was up until about the 5th century. Right? We had in terms of the subjects they were covering from the 5th century to the 7th century. This is more general knowledge, bring all of the Prophet's life. So you have people like Yahweh, and then you have right. Islam is in different places, Andalus, where all type of genres are specialized, general, right? And the Muslim world in terms of academics, especially in those times. Okay, so here again, but the same process between the known scholars, people who were respected for their knowledge of sunnah, of authority, of transmission. Right, these were primarily the people that were restored this knowledge. Then in the 11th century, right, this is where most of the knowledge was. The beliefs were pretty much set. We had libraries that have all types of knowledge. So knowledge became very accessible. It became very difficult to travel 300 miles to hear one hadith. Right? No, the hadith were now recorded and preserved, and it will go back to those sources and extract the knowledge that you need. This is where I mentioned we get the people like Ibn Qayyim, people like Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Dhahabi, right? All of these great ulama that we saw out. Right, when I graduated from Medina, one of the us they gave by Ibn Taymiyyah. Right, every student got a copy of this book, 30 volume book of all of them. Right? And early on, personally, when I came into Islam, I came under the tradition. My very beginning as a Muslim, I've been hearing about Ibn Qayyim, right? So these scholars, this is, and they see things to a whole level. And up to into our times now, right? They're in the 6th century. Then they start to write independent books on the entire life of Prophet Muhammad, and that process has pretty much remained for a long time. So that's pretty much all I want to mention concerning codification, or how the process of having Seerah, how that whole process came about. May Allah be pleased with may He reward them, and may He benefit from their knowledge. I mean, any questions on that aspect of codification books and these things? And as I mentioned, this is second more. I'll get inshallah soon. We'll just get into the life of the prophets on that. All right. So now I quickly want to jump into the dominant forces outside pre-Islamic Arabia. Right, and we know mentioned in the Quran, right? The longest surah in the Quran, Surah Baqarah, is about who? Jews. Primarily about the Jews. And around these surahs, we have surah after surah that speak about these people that came before us, right? Again, I first became Muslim, and I would notice how Allah mentioned these people. Allah talking so much about these people, and I kind of figured it out that Allah too repeating the thing that these people made, right? So number one, you had the Romans, which was they had a certain part of the empire. The empire was known, and extended parts of Asia, right? These were large and huge amounts of land, different people, different religions, right? Part of the Roman Empire of Asia. You're talking about Palestine. You're talking about Africa, right? This was all under the control of the Byzantines, right before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The thing about these lands is that when the Romans took over, they wouldn't allow the indigenous people the authority, right? They would hand the authority over to one of their own, right? That wasn't familiar with the eccentric people. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot just to give you an idea of what was very oppressive, right? The Roman system, there were tactics for ruling, the taxation, the confiscation of wealth, right? There was at this time Roman Empire. Not to say there wasn't any good and people were good, right? But in general, this is the reality was happening at this time. There were a lot of extreme in the Roman Empire, poverty, right? There's stories of people selling their kids into the empire to pay off debt. Extreme, right? This is where we get the gladiators and the Luciferian animals. Extreme punishments, right? We look at some of the that were people in those days, right? Extreme. Where did they get this stuff from, right? They made it up. They invented. I was talking to some of our young people about the hudud. What happens if you steal, right? These things are important. Where do we get these ideas from? How do we consequences, right? So if we're not basing these things on revelation, and go to all types. And also, there was extravagance for the elite. More than the people they were ruling. And then in terms of the religion empire, you had some of it was idolatry. There was Christianity. There was Judaism. This is like people that they want to do good. They want to be good people, but they kind of go about it, right? So they would do extra. There would be extra in their concept of Allah, right? And because they didn't know how to love Allah in the right way. Our Nabi sallallahu Allah tells us Dalen, right? Prophet Muhammad says how to express his worship, express his love, had that to Allah, include himself in the cave. He would stay away from certain things, but he didn't know exactly how to fight God in the way that he wants me to worship him. Right? And we have a similar story with Abu Dhar. He was Hanif. He never worshipped idols. Right? He always tried Allah. And one time he was having a discussion with Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu asked, what did you do? How worship God? Like you didn't know what you were doing. How did you go about worship? Abu Dhar said, basically I faced east and go down and make some movement. Laughed together about it. So they didn't know how to go about worshiping Allah. Right? We can go to extremes, or abandon any type. And then we have the Persia or the Sassanid Empire. That's more eastern, and you have Iran, Iraq, Palestine was in their control, Roman control, and that's how it was contesting empires, right? They were each other. They were always in competition with each other. They switched the route. So you had Syria came to these places, the Indian subcontinent, and also Central Asia. Right, so these are huge empires, modern day, right? And some people say the Persians were more powerful, and in terms of religion amongst them, Zoroastrianism, which basically is the you had Christianity, you had Judaism, who rules these people. Father from son, and it was very corrupt. Persian rulers, they looked at themselves as they were gods. They looked at themselves in light. So everything belonged to these rulers, and when we have this type of power, right? A lot of times it leads to corruption, and some people say they will have more than the Byzantines, and again, is this based what they seem to be completely astray and involved in all. Part of the Byzantine Empire. When we look at India, right? Things going on there, things happening. The woman, for example, if they lost their husband, they pretty much life was over for them. They were unable to remarry. Isolated, developed very strict diets, right? Really not based in any revelation. Was the caste system. So this was some of the areas that closed, and these were also areas we have to remember. I mentioned this last week. It was a trip of the trading route. It was very central to all of that. So in particular had a lot of access to these different empires. They had diplomatic ties with them. Like Amr ibn al-As, he had deep connection with this, right? He was well known in these empires, and he used all of this actions and resources, these empires, to initially fight against the Muslims, and then of course radiallahu anhu. So what I'm saying is, and the Quraysh were not isolated. They would have awareness of what was happening. Right? That's another times we think that what we're dealing with in our times is, and it's unheard of, and it's unprecedented. And right? Most of the, especially we're talking about for why these things have been around long time, right? In all different forms imaginable. Also, that's pretty much the. Of course, you had Abyssinia. They were a little more friendly. They were more just. They were more fair. They kind of been around with the Prophet ﷺ from the very beginning. Ethiopians, they were there. They were there from the very beginning. As we Baraka, Ayman, she was there from the very beginning, from the time he was born. She was there. His father passes away. She was there. When his mother passed, she was there. When his uncle, she was there. When he becomes a prophet, she's there. She's there, right? When he to visit her often and have shura with her, right? Abyssinia there from the very beginning in a very support light. So that's dominant forces outside of Arabia. And quickly, we'll talk about the dominant religious time, Christianity. So what happened? Right, as we know, Isa alayhi salam, he doesn't claim this faith. By definition, who he was belonged to Beni Israel. Right, he was a Jewish person. He followed the laws and the ways. He never proclaimed a new faith. A new faith was the faith of the Jews. Right? That's what he was practicing. Of course, he had distortions. He was justify those things. But basically, what happened was very important. Happened. As you all know, Isa comes from. We go back. Ibrahim salam. He had. Isa goes back to Ishaq. So that was the end from Moses' time. All the way to Islam. All the Rusul are from Beni Israel. Right? They're all from Ishaq. All of them. Sometimes 3 at a time. They're all from the same tribe. Right? So this with each stopped, and it was of prophethood, going back to Ishaq. And of course, Isa never taught the Trinity. He never claimed the Trinity. The Trinity developed, and it became spread throughout, and even up until the time of the people, even up to our times, right? There's people that still debate concerning the idea of the Trinity, right? And how that came about, right? It was very interesting how and became official church doctrine, right? Of course, the invite, even the four gospels, right? Who are these? Who's John? We don't know. Some people say it's pen name, right? We don't know who. We don't know Matthew is, right? We don't know them, right? In Islam, we'll consider them majhul. We don't know these people. Who are they? Right? But we have no idea. We're not saying this that as Muslim, I'm some knowledge. No, this is well known, right? So even the four gospels, we don't know who these men are. So it's very important. There were a lot of saints, where right away, and then they would be taken as many people would go to them, seeking Allah's favor. Sometimes statues and taken as worship. And then you have in certain areas, you had skeletons were preserved and hairs were preserved. They go back to these holy. So these type of statues were widespread. So this is what the majority of people in these empires, right? A lot of times people follow no religion at all. It wasn't something firmly well preserved and go to. Right? Everything had become distorted and corrupt. So, and this was pretty much the Jews, more rituals, their traditions, a lot of rituals involved in, and this had some of it had to do with them related to the bordering empire. You have the Romans, you have and these people are mushrikun, right? These people are these heavies. So now imagine you're supposed to be you're supposed to be the worshiping Allah alone, and contending with these dominant empires, all concepts into your tradition. So the Jews were not very weak. They didn't have authority, right? So they were prone to the things that were going on within these empires. And one writer, he says that the prophets, meaning the sent to Beni Israel, he said that the prophets about idol worship, right? The prophets in Israel, the Jews, they were audited about shirk, about wanting to worship other things. They were like almost nations were doing. This is what the other people, why can't we do what they're doing? Let's just do something similar to that. That way we are more accepted. We fit in. So this was part of what happened. So the prophets were conscious about idol worship. That the concepts of idol worship and polytheism of the children of Israel. They were a people superstitious and beliefs. And the text source for many Jews attest to the fact that they attached to the idea of idol worship. Their own books, right? It's recorded their extreme desire to worship of, and again also their scriptures had distorted. They contained a lot of false information, and then also you had fires widespread in Persia, and houses that were built just for the worship. There were strict guidelines inside the temples, right? The people would behave a certain way. They would do whatever they wanted. They were primarily responsible for the fire. Had to make sure worship was prepared. The fire was prepared, and they would worship the fire. They also believed in two. They believed generally in God of God, right. So this is what made them polytheistic. Right? Even though the Christians are polytheistic, we say, not the Hukam, right? But they're labeled Ahlul Kitab because he's three, but he's one at the same. There's no two. There's one God, and there's three things into that one God. These people, they say no, different gods. There's a God of this. There's a God of that. And these are the traditions that were around. Buddhism, right, and they had developed. You had the caste system, right, and the Brahmins and things, and the outcasts. So these systems there. So when it came to religion, right before Prophet Muhammad sallam, this was the condition. The condition of the people. Prophet sallam, he summarized this for us, and I've shared this hadith. It's a long hadith, so bear with me. I'll skip the app and just focus on the English, just for the time's sake. So in this long hadith in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet sallam, he says, "Behold, my Lord, you teach that which you do not know. From what He has taught me, the people had for ignorance. They had no way to get ignorance. We needed knowledge from Allah of this ignorance." And he said, "The wealth I have granted upon lawful for them. I created all of them, having natural in hunafa, to the worship of Allah. And he tells us about our open statement. He says, but save from their religion. He makes what has been declared lawful for them, and he commands them like me that which do not try partners with me that which has power revealed to them. Right, and then he continues. Allah looked upon the inhabitants of the world of that time. He looked at all the inhabitants, the Arab and the non-Arab. He despised them. Right? He despised what they were doing, far away from Tawheed. There was no more salat left. There was none of this way, except for a few people from the people of the book. He further said, I have only sent you. Right? This is important. I have you, the prophet, right, to test you. So the Prophet, we know he was Hanif. He never committed shirk. And we were a big test for him. Conveying the message and his methodology in conveying and he also says, and to test others, and he is also a test for us. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And also another character in that he's a test. This is not us, right? This life, it's a test. He tells us about the master key for that test. He sent a book to you which cannot be washed away by water. Right? It's not about the book is where the book is in the heart. So that you recite while in a state of wake or sleep. How do we recite the Quran when we sleep? When we're awake, right? We recite it. But what about when we sleep? How do you recite it? Recite it in your dreams. Night prayer, a little more specific. We do dua, right? If we read Surah Al-Kursi, what happens? Angels protects you from the time you sleep, right? So if we do it at night, we recite these at the right times, even if we're not right. He's still with us, helping us, guiding us. Inshallah. And the hadith, indeed, Allah commanded me, right? So just at Arabia, Allah, very serious language here, and uharriq Quraysh, that I burn Quraysh, right? Meaning, and the Prophet ﷺ, he became concerned here. He knows what he says. My Lord, they will bust my head like the bread. I cannot defeat Quraysh. Right? And this was Quraysh that had Ibrahim, that had Hajj, that were protected in the trips, the summer. This was Quraysh. Nobody would bother them. No one would disturb them. Right? But they fell into unease with them, and he ordered the Prophet ﷺ to fight them. And said, perhaps not going to be able to defeat them. Allah responded, as they expel you. Fight against them, and this cause, and we would spend upon you. And then I will send times greater. Fight along with those who obey against those who disobey you. So Allah wanted from the Prophet to make that effort. And then the rest of it, take care of numerous maghazi of salama. And then it's a few more parts. It said the people, this hadith continues. So this gives us an idea of how evil the condition of humans had been, right? Because listen to what is mentioned here. People of Jannah are three. There are three categories of Jannah. Doesn't mention in this part. He doesn't mention people. He doesn't mention people that make Hajj. Who does he mention? Who does he mention? He says the people of are three. To give you an idea of what was happening in the time. One who has authority, right, and does what with that authority? He is fair, truthful, and he has been endowed ability to do good deeds. This authority to do good deeds. Is the one who is merciful and kind-hearted. He is good-hearted. So again, what was happening in the world at that time, right? This mentioned, it's a kind person, and we're hesitant to be kind these days. We don't want to show weakness. We don't want to show any concern about that. So he says the merciful and kind-hearted too towards his relatives. That's number one, right? Me coming from a non-Muslim background, I have a lot of debates with people who are Muslim or who have reverted, and they still have non-Muslim friends. Anonymous. It's Christmas. That's the only time the family gets together. Oh, it's East. That's the only time we all really. Your job is to maintain the connection, right? It's your job is not to go to these. No, it's to maintain the relatives, whether it's Christmas, whatever it may be. The only time you're concerned about that is during the holidays. Stay in touch, have some relations with your relatives all the time, right? Even right? Let's be clear. Keep that silatul rahim. It's as simple as making dua. It's not that complicated. So being kind to relatives and who else? To other Muslims, right? So they're merciful and kind-hearted, and to Muslims in general. And the third person is the family man, is chaste, virtuous. The family man who is chaste, subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. I mean, it says then the people of the fire, right? So 3 Jannah, but 5 for the hellfire. The first one who lack courage to avoid evil, and he gives us some detail. What does that pursue? Irrespective of the fact that it's good or evil, and concern for their family or for whatever their shahwa, my family, my money, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna do what I'm. The second is the dishonest, whose greed cannot be conceived, even in the case of mine. Aki, you want to fight? What do you want to argue for? What's the problem? Any mind, right? They sit out there. They want to dominate, win, to right. The last one, I'm sorry. The third is the one who betrays you in regard to your family and your property, right? Someone you know, no matter they're going to deceive you and betray you. And he also mentioned the liar, one who was stingy and greedy, one who abuses people, and obscene and foul language. Right? So when we look at the Prophet ﷺ, he said, he said, I have only been sent for one thing, to perfect what? Good. No, that's right. He gives us an idea of the condition that these would and I'll stop here. I mean, we have a few minutes, right? Yeah, we have some minutes. Okay. Want to say something?
So if you guys have any questions, you can prepare the salah. It's in 7 minutes.
Just next week we'll just read about Arabia. Right here we're talking about the world at large, and then Arabia specifically, and then we'll get into the birth of some important things that happened at the time of the Prophet's birth. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yes, brother. Yes, brother. I'm sorry, but why didn't I talk in depth? In, Allahu alam, because when we talk about wisdom, it's really connected to polytheism. Right? A lot of the references to when you look at Hinduism, there's a lot of worship. There's a lot of intermediaries between them and the. So Islam addresses that repeatedly. Ahlul Kitab and the Yahud, they're a little different. They have similarities to us. We believe in the same prophet. When I was a Muslim, I knew about Noah, right? These were concepts that I believed in, and Islam satisfied them for me. But Hinduism isn't specifically, right? The ideology of it, the idolatry, the duality of God. These constantly repeated throughout hadith. Okay, sure. Subhanakallah. Thank you, Sheikh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.